Okay. What is Sonia's problem? Okay, Sonia's lost. And my link says husband. I don't know. Okay, let me see. I cannot multitask. I'm really bad at that. So I'm going to minimize you, but I haven't left. Okay. All right. Well, let's just start. So Hannah, now I can control it.
Yes.
Okay.
Hold on 1 second. Kathy, did you mute your phone purposely? Because it's showing that the phone is muted. You see that, Hannah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
How weird.
I'm gonna click a button real quick. It's ask you to unmute, and then it'll pop up with a prompt on your screen to unmute. See if that works at all.
Is that working?
Yes.
That just it. Oh, and it's showing me just the opposite.
You're working.
But okay. All right.
Yay. Okay. Thank you, Hannah. You guys want to start? I think we should introduce each other because Christy is new to our meeting, to our group. So I'll just, I'm Linda Hutchinson. I'm the News Access and Literacy Task Force leader, sort of. And I live in Loveland, and I'm a member of the Larimer County League. So Jory, your turn.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jory Kramer. I too am a member of the Larimer League. And Christy, it's really good to meet you. I saw your name on an email from Karen Sheik. And so I'm looking forward to, I work with our local library, the Poudre Library District, on a couple of projects. And so I've emailed them about doing some more partnership on things. So it's exciting, and we love the library. And we love everybody who's here, so nobody feels left out.
Oh, Kathy.
I'm Kathy Wilson. I am the co-director for Action and Advocacy for the Colorado League, and I'm on the board of the Colorado League. I'm also on the board of the Larimer County Local League. So yeah, I get around.
Sharon.
Okay. I'm a member of the Larimer League, and I live in Fort Collins.
Thanks. Diana.
I'm a member of the Larimer League for almost a year now. And I live in Loveland, and I get confused about which ones of these groups are because the faces seem the same.
Okay, Kathleen.
I'm Kathleen Marr. I'm member of the Larimer League as well, and I agree with Diana. We see some familiar faces a lot. I also live in Loveland.
Francis.
I am astonished to hear from so many people living in Loveland.
Yeah.
I'm a member of the Larimer League, on the board of the Larimer League, heading with help the Southern Larimer discussion group, which is primarily about issues in Loveland. And I think that's about it.
And Hannah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Hannah. I am the LWVCO operations manager. I just started about 4 months ago, so A lot of you are new to me, and I'm sure I'm new to you in some way, shape, or form. So it's nice to meet you all. I'm going to hop off because I have a board meeting to prep for that is after this. Kathy, you're nodding your head. But best of luck to all of you tonight. Please feel free to shoot me an email if anything goes wrong. But otherwise, it was really nice to meet you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And know that Hannah's awesome. All right, can I underline that 3 times? Awesome.
Okay, well, I have before you leave, Hannah, I
Yes.
have somebody who can't get in, and I sent Sonia my link, but she says she cannot get in. It keeps saying that the host has another meeting in progress.
I think she must have. Do you see? Because there's no one. I'm not the host anymore.
there
on
it
the
is.
board.
Okay, I got her. She got in.
Perfect.
Thank you.
No problem. All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, so Christy, you want to introduce yourself?
So hi, you can hear me, right? It's so weird when I'm on a headset. Hi, my name is Christy Moran. I am not a member of the League of Women Voters in Colorado. I am I work at the Colorado State Library. So what that means to you guys probably is, and to everyone really, is that you know how you have a librarian at your library? I'm the librarian for your librarians, the ones who serve adults. It's specifically my call, but I work with libraries everywhere around the state, kind of supporting them and connecting them to resources. And I'm here because I saw the News Access and Literacy Task Force work that you guys are doing. And I was really interested in coming in and seeing what you were doing and finding out if there was any way I could help you connect with libraries other than Pooter, or maybe Pooter, I don't know. And I also, I am not in Loveland, but I was in a meeting today with like 2 people from Loveland. So this is like, it's like my Loveland day. And I found out that one of my conferences is going to be held in Loveland later this year.
Well, everybody loves Loveland, I guess.
Evidently.
Well, we're glad you could join us.
I'm glad to
And
be here.
thank you. Sonia.
Sorry to be late. I got some strange message that the host already had another meeting in progress. I'm like, what? I'm having a good time with Zoom. I don't know. It must have been me if no one else got that message. So I'm Sonia Ketting with League of Women Voters Larimer, and I am very involved in news access and literacy, and also helping lead the Colorado Citizen Observer Pilot Project, which Christy, you could probably help us with that. We are recruiting citizens to attend public meetings and record them and put them on a public facing platform. So formerly they just attended meetings and put them on league information and it didn't go anywhere. But now we have a grant to try to get this information out to the community. And it's with an eye on supporting news access for citizens and journalists. So that's what I'm working on. And tomorrow we're having a meeting with Friday, tomorrow's just Wednesday, a meeting with the Colorado Freedom of Information Council, who's going to give a lesson on what rights citizens have, sunshine law and so forth in attending public meetings. So we've got about 6 or 7 more months to prove out the grant and then hopefully take it statewide.
Okay. First, the first thing we were going to do tonight is review that Senate bill, but I forgot that Kathy has to leave early and she would like to tell us about what's Kathy. That's why I asked you to tell them about it, because I can't remember the name of it.
It's the age appropriate design. It's not a bill yet. So age appropriate design code. And we were approached to possibly be part of one of the initial states that's working on this. And what this is a child protection bill if it comes to pass. It began in the United Kingdom. They were able to pass their legislation that restricts access for children for things on things on the web that would not be appropriate for them. And then California passed the bill. That's I think the first one in the country that passed it. And now they want to see, they're earmarking us as one of the next few states to see if we can get a similar legislation. They would love to have federal legislation with this, but they're not expecting much at this point, especially with the change in the majority in the House. So they're going to try to do state by state, a state by state approach with this. Let me see. So I was, when we were talking about this, when we went to the meeting, I thought, well, this seems like a really good collaboration between the education task force and news access and literacy. So it might be a joint effort for us. What they're talking about is delineating within the legislation bands by children's age as to what access would be limited and what wouldn't be. And the age range that they're trying to get across in the United States is 18 and under. So it's a good solid range. In some places they've been talking about 13 and under. Let's see what else I have that I can give you that's relatively quick. Told you that. When they
Who is it
polled,
that's promoting this?
it is this, well, it's with the Children's Campaign is one of it, and Reset Tech. There was somebody, Matali Jane from Reset Tech, or Jan, excuse me, from Reset Tech was one of the people on it. There was somebody from Colorado Media Project that was there, somebody from the Rose Community Foundation. Tim Reagan was there. Reagan Porter was there from the Colorado Press Association. So it was kind of a mix of people and groups that were invited to this. And then Andrea Wilkins and Maud was there for a little bit, but mainly Andrea Wilkins and I were there.
So there's an informational or they may speak at the January 9th meeting, right?
Yes. Yeah. And that's what we were trying to set up, is for them to speak so that they could get deeper into exactly what they're looking for with this and how we can help. But this was something that when they polled the public in California, it got bipartisan support, which was, really nice with that. So what
A
I would,
question?
yeah.
When they speak, could you have them separate? We know that there's a large groups of parents arguing that they should have total control over what their kids see. We know about that side of things. So when they speak to us, if they could separate what they are doing from what we see happening elsewhere to control what kids see, that would be important.
And I think, Fran, I think part of that would be really individualized for the state. Okay. Since there's no federal umbrella law that would cover this at this point. And really, this meeting was just on the absolute surface to see if anybody was at all interested in getting involved with this.
So Texas and Colorado would have, Texas and California would have very different results.
There are different states, okay? And you're talking about statewide legislation. So who knows if they would pass it there? We have no control over them, but we do obviously in Colorado, and we could use our input on this.
Okay,
type of
well,
thing.
I don't want to rush us through it.
No,
But I
that's
kind
okay.
of do because we got to get on to the other stuff. But I want everybody to be aware there's a meeting, a task force meeting on the 9th, right, Kathy?
I think
on
that's what you
January
wrote.
9th.
I'd have to look at the calendar.
I think it's on January 9th. There's an education task force meeting that the 2 members who are I can't say leading the campaign, the children's campaign, is that who
Yes.
they are? They'll be at the education task force meeting to talk about the bills. So if we're interested, I mean, I go to the education task force meetings now, but more than maybe one of us, it would be good if more of us could go if we're in, so we can
Sure.
see if Nell's interested in it.
More the merrier.
Right.
At the education task force.
There's a lot of people.
Yeah,
at
it's
the
actually a
task
really good group, so.
Yeah, it's a big group. Okay, so can I move on now? You
Sure.
good? Okay, so I'm gonna share something here.
I just want to say thanks, Christy, for putting that in. If you look at the chat, you'll see the link to the legislation.
Right. Okay. Okay, can you see my screen? Can everybody
Yes.
see it?
Yeah.
Okay, so I read that we're going to talk about Senate Bill 673, Journalism Competition and Preservation Act of 2022. I read 44 pages of this stuff and tried to condense it into 1 page. It didn't work, but I got it down to 2. So we're good, I think. The stated purpose is to provide a temporary safe harbor for publishers of online content so that they can collectively negotiate with online platforms regarding the terms of which their content can be distributed. And about the first, I don't know, 8 or 10 pages are definitions, but I picked out 3 and kind of tried to work with those. So the first one is access to digital content is acquiring, crawling, or indexing content. An online platform is defined as a platform that accesses digital content from a digital journalism provider and has at least 50,000 active users or subscribers. And an eligible digital journalism provider is one who engages professionals to create, edit, all that stuff, local, regional, national, and international news, and update that news at least weekly, has generated at least $100,000 from its editorial content during the past year, and employs no more than 1,500 exclusive full-time employees. And 25% of the provider's editorial content must be about topics of current, local, national, and international public interest. So this legislation, this bill provides a framework whereby an eligible provider, journalism provider, publicly invites other providers to join a joint negotiation entity to enter into negotiations with an online platform regarding how they can use their information. And then the second step is the platform has 30 days to reply to this public announcement. They have to acknowledge it, I guess. Then the third step is, it isn't really the third step, but when they form these entities, any eligible provider who wants to join an entity within the 60 days after the invitation is announced has to be allowed to join. And So there's 60 days right there. Then the final arbitration offer is made 180 days after the last provider joins the entity. So you've got 240 days here that they can negotiate. I guess if they get it done sooner, that's good, but 240 days. The entity uses majority vote to determine the rules under which it will operate, and each provider has one vote. If a news provider opts out of the entity after joining, they may not rejoin or collect any of the money that's awarded. The entities cease to exist when they no longer have at least 2 members, when they vote to break up the entity, or when the negotiations are completed. All parties must negotiate in good faith. They appoint a 3-member panel to oversee the arbitration, and the rules are according to some arbitration booklet that everybody follows. I didn't copy the name down. At any point after they announce that they're going to negotiate, the members of the entity may vote to deny access to content until the negotiations are complete. And the cost of the arbitration is split evenly between the platform and the entity. And then they have non-discrimination, retaliation, and transparency. So a joint negotiation entity may not refuse membership to a provider based on the size of the provider or the views expressed by the provider's content. And an online platform may not refuse to negotiate with a provider belonging to a joint negotiation entity based on the size of the provider or the views expressed by the eligible digital journalism providers' content. Now you know why I always skip over all those words, because I can't say all of them in a row. The digital journalism provider must provide to the FTC records of how they spent the arbitration award, because it has to be spent toward maintaining publication and broadcasting of news. It can't go to give the CEO more money or whoever he is. And then any eligible provider or covered platform that participated in the negotiations can bring a civil action if they feel that the negotiation criteria or requirements were violated. And the bill sunsets in 6 years. That's it. So who wants to share what they found out when they read?
Do you want, am I on here? Do you want me to talk about the opinion that I read?
Yeah.
Because it gives a little bit different perspective, and it's not, I don't have all that much to say about it, but this was an opinion that was in the Los Angeles Times back in October. It was titled, "A New Law Can Help Us Keep a Robust Free Press that our democracy needs." And so the angle that this person who wrote it, and I of course didn't put the author here, was that because Google and Facebook currently control the bulk of digital advertising, they have also become the main source of news. And Google will link to news stories that different providers are given. But the problem with this is that 65% of the users on Google or Facebook don't click through to the news publisher's website. And the result of not clicking through is that the consumers are not being exposed to the smaller publications advertisers on their outlet, and less businesses therefore are advertising with, like, the Reporter Herald or a smaller news outlets, which is reducing the amount of revenue for the smaller news outlets. So that's one of the things that's really zapping the smaller ones, and which is responsible for things like reducing the number of reporters they have because of not being able to pay for them, as an example. And what the opinion writer said was dominant internet platforms have effectively collected market power because of the amount of advertising they could do. And it enables larger platforms to dictate to other businesses whose content they can use. So it really right now what happens is they really have a lot of power that way. The Journalism Competition and Conservation Act would allow these smaller entities to bargain together, which is what Linda was talking about for the news stories. But large news networks and national newspapers would be excluded. They wouldn't be able to join these groups. Now, the critics, according to this writer, the critics say that if they allow this bill to go through, then essentially what it's allowing is the smaller groups to be a news media cartel. And for a long time, antitrust laws have authorized numerous forms of coordination, though otherwise independent enterprises in circumstances that are similar to what this law is proposing. For example, agricultural businesses and fisheries have been allowed to economically coordinate with each other to give them a little bit more power. So the writer really believes that this would provide safe harbors for the smaller business.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Does anybody want to comment, or should we just go around and review what everybody read first, and then we can talk about what we think of this bill? Is that how you want to do it?
Well, I have one thought in mind from what Kathy just shared. And it makes me like the Local Journalism Act that we tried to get behind for our state. I liked that better because it's such a roundabout way, Kathy, that I'm hearing this description of the money gets sucked out of the news because they don't go to the news. And so now those news entities have to, muscle up against big tech to try to extract money, when if we just incentivize people to advertise elsewhere, not on Facebook, maybe it wouldn't be as much money, but it's also not as litigious. And it seems like it would include smaller news entities, not these, 20,000 or subscribers and what did it say, $200,000 a year in income from the news. So that's a big bar. That leaves out a lot of people, is where our Local News Act was going to include much smaller entities than that. I mean, most of those in our state fall above that bar.
But one of the problems, if I look at it, we supported it, right? I thought it was a really good thing. But one of the complaints that I heard when I was listening to the committees discuss this was that that was a income tax credit. So it was taking away money from the Colorado government and what they could, even though it wasn't going to be, it was significant enough to catch their attention. Okay. And that's one of the reasons why it got bogged down. But the other reason was just the end of the session, and it got stuck in the appropriations committee and didn't get reviewed at that point. And I'll also say that I heard Lisa Cutter when I was attending a Jeffco meeting, and they had legislators from Jeffco, and I don't know if she saw me or what, but one of the first things she said was that she was not going to pursue that bill this year. So she wasn't going to take it up this year. She had other things that were higher on her priority because they can only introduce 5 bills. And that was not one of her fives for this year. She said maybe next year. So
Okay, well, it's just in my mind, I'm just waiting for the pieces, like if we get behind something and make any suggestions or advocacy, waiting for the pieces that allow smaller players in. And that isn't putting all of its eggs in a big basket of more litigation against big tech. Because there's a lot of that, but I don't know, maybe it's the only way. Anyhow, moving on.
Okay, so Diana, do you want to go over what you read?
Well, and can you later share what I sent to you?
Yep.
It probably is more.
Okay, here's
it's
one of
the-
those multitasking things I have to do. Okay.
Or even later, like email later or whatever.
Yeah, I got it. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, there it is. Can you see it?
Not yet.
it's kind, there it
Oh,
is.
These are the notes let me say, this was the absolute worst letter I'd ever read in my entire life. I think it was written by lawyers. Anyway, this is kind of to preface this. I thought it was interesting in 2019, this the Journalism Competition and Preservation Act was supported by the American Society of News Editors, the National Newspapers Association, News Media Alliance, which included the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the Wall Street Journal. And they're not mentioned in this letter as far as backing it. But it came out in originally, what we had, oh, this letter was in September, wasn't it? Okay. And these people who signed it, they're 21 who signed it, the first letter, and then there's a subsequent letter that came out recently that was signed by 9 more groups. And I didn't really see anything obvious about being a newspaper group. But they have, the first letter went to the Senate leaders, Durbin, Grassley, Klobuchar, and Lee. The second letter is pretty much the same wording. There are a couple of things that note how the recent election was certainly influenced by misinformation and that sort of thing. And it was sent to the leadership of the entire Congress in the Senate and the House, because they don't want it put on the must pass agenda here before the end of the session, before the next year. So I thought that was the biggest difference in the two. First, they sent it to the committee members on the Judiciary Committee, and then this recent letter is right up to the top to Pelosi and Schumer and McCarthy and McConnell. So they're going after it so it doesn't get passed quickly before the end of the year. They had 6 basic objectives. They claim they are all people, all groups that they name them. There's self-represented as civil society organizations, libraries, and archive, the people who put things in archives. Creators, tech company, and experts in antitrust, copyright, constitutional, and digital rights laws, and media and news groups. Sounds like it's a battle boiling up between the traditional journalism and the new platforms. Okay, in the 6 different areas, and I'll get to that page, and it's outlined in that those notes that I included too. The internet, oh, let's go to number 1. I have it on, I've got it on 5 now. Yeah, 4, 3, oh, there it is. Okay, yeah, go ahead up. The first go, okay, you're right, it should be down to 5.
Okay.
Because I'm not looking at it.
Okay.
Did you notice that Ken Buck was one of the sponsors
Yeah.
of it?
Yeah, I think he started a bill, couple of years ago with David Cicilline, and but their bill was so much simpler than this bill ended up
I think
being.
this sounds really confusing, but under number 5, you're right. It says
Yeah.
6 primary concerns are the internet platforms would be forced to negotiate payments to carry content from any digital journalism provider, which qualifies regardless of how extreme or weird. Okay. Secondly, the fair use, and that's coming out of journalism. I've always felt that's, fair use. Well, even now I put stuff on Facebook and I credit wherever I got it. I don't put on whole articles, but I still say if I got it, that way they can see that I got it from a reputable source. So it kind of affects what I would do too. So that's kind of fair use, and most authors, I think, are used to that idea. Libraries and archives and going beyond and they think this would just go beyond the traditional limits of copyright law. In other words, just going too far. The large media conglomerates could still dominate negotiations, they feel, leaving small local publishers at a disadvantage. They said that employee cap of 1,500 would exclude only the top 3 newspaper publishers and no broadcasters. The act would favor the big broadcasters and undermine the goal of helping. They just feel like it's not good for the local news. It would create collective bargaining for news organizations, which don't even allow their own employees to do that sort of thing. Interesting they chose that. And they feel like it really lacks accountability for the funding, where you're spending the money and an audit process. And 6, past antitrust exemptions have harmed competition and consumers. And I put in think pro sports, Major League Baseball, the NBA, kind of has entrenched, these antitrust exemptions have entrenched the power structures and fostered a codependence between the industry members. In other words, leaving it the way it is. And then they feel like it would cement and stimulate consolidation, creating new barriers for new and innovative models. And I think they think it would hurt the online platforms too. And one of the early signers of this letter, they were like the 6th one on public knowledge, and you might want to go to see that. They think it would prevent people who are online from linking, their thoughts, like whatever platform you're using, to share those news articles to other digital platforms and websites. And then they would limit the availability of credible information online. And they feel like it's a clear threat to our democracy. And here it boils down to the public knowledge writer saying that the better solution to solving the journalism crisis is to directly help the most harmed newspapers, rather than allowing our largest media conglomerates to become cartels, basically. Was there anything else? I don't think I added. That was the letter itself. I had to read lots of things before I kind of understood what they were talking about. But interesting, one of the signers, maybe somebody can address that, is concerned with European use of platforms and that sort of thing, which I didn't go into much detail on, and I don't know if I probably do. Hang on a minute.
Okay.
I think it might have been the Creative Commons. No, but it is, one of them is involved with the European, their concerns too, so they expect it to affect them as well. All right. I don't answer questions because I don't know it that well.
Okay. Okay. Anybody want to say anything, or should we move on to the next report? Kath?
It sounded like we were saying, like your writers were saying opposite things, like about the networks and the large papers, because what I read in this opinion was they were excluded from joining in, and it sounded like yours were saying they weren't excluded.
Jory, do you know?
Problems
something?
with the-
I think part of it is that there's only 3 newspapers that would be excluded, and that's WAPO,
Yeah.
NYT, and Los Angeles Times, or
Yeah,
Wall Street Journal. So it'd only be those 3 newspapers that would be excluded. And then I think too, and I don't know why my hand went up, I didn't raise it, but anyway, that as far as like the conglomerates, it's each news source. So the Reporter Herald and the Denver Post, even though they're owned by the same conglomerate, would not count. You know, the Reporter Herald would be one entity, the Denver Post would be another. So there's that. So all of a sudden you're consolidating, but these big mega corporations are getting in their hands into it. So that's kind of, at least I read the Cato Institute's con argument on this, and that's what I picked up from them.
Christy.
I was just gonna say, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, if any of you are familiar with them, have a piece on it, because I just looked it up, and they're often on both sides, but they tend to be very like freedom of access. So they have a piece on it. If you want, I could share it in the link, in the chat. I don't have a one way or another feeling about it, but it does explain they're against it, and it does explain kind of more simply, I think, than the letter writing, why they are, and what they actually think. Like they think like, oh, that's actually the wrong move. The right move is this other solution that's already available. So it may be worth looking at if it's just going to help you guys make decisions, or even just understand that position.
Well, and I found another letter actually I found it on the Public Knowledge website that's from pretty much that same group. And I think it's a very clear letter. It actually very clearly stated
Public Insight also
cons.
had one too. Public Insight, which may be NPR related, had one. It was the one I first read, and I recall that it was not in favor of it too. But
what I thought was interesting about the letter that Diane reviewed, and then this other one that was from actually the same group but sent December 5th, when they were trying to get this included in the Defense Act bill, which is a must pass. So that's why everybody tries to dump things into it. But it didn't get put into the Defense Act bill. But what I thought was interesting was the coalition itself. It was made up of the ACLU, Common Cause, just a whole bunch of people that are of groups that I usually associate with more progressive and leanings, and that they would be against it, I think is very, very telling. But I think, Diane, you really did summarize the 6 points there quite clearly, why they're against it. And Linda, do you want me to just go ahead and jump in on what I found out from the Cato Institute?
Yeah,
At
sure.
this point? Oh, that's my notes on the age appropriate thing. Okay. The Cato Institute had 2 pieces. Again, one was from back in September when the bill rolled around, and then again early in December when it looked like it was when they were trying to get it put into the Defense Act. But basically, this bill is what they said. This is from that. This bill is about politicians taking money from businesses they don't like big tech, and giving it to companies they consider virtuous, quote unquote, e.g. small newspapers. It is not a neutral mechanism for genuine negotiation in value exchange, but is a hidden tax and subsidy policy. The bill explicitly compels both negotiators and even arbitrators to ignore any value conferred to digital journalism providers from being aggregated or distributed by the tech giants. In other words, if my little newspaper gets picked up by Google and they send it out, that gives me value. But I can't, the bill doesn't allow for my newspaper to then compensate Google for the value that it gave my content. In a genuinely free news market, or in a genuinely free market, news outlets taking such action, such as the saying you can't use my content unless you pay for it, would face the risk that the digital platforms would just stop listening and stop using their content. So the bill doesn't take that into consideration. If a media company demands payment for accessing their output, platforms like Google and Meta are specifically barred from retaliating against the former's content. And this is what happened in Australia and Spain when they tried to do it. There was retaliation. They just stopped carrying the content and said, okay, we don't need you. Digital platforms aren't allowed to refuse to index content or from changing the ranking, identification, modification, branding, or placement of a website's content. Legislators single out news publishers because they think there's something inherently valuable about digital journalism, and they want to be seen to punish Google and Meta for their role in disrupting the traditional newspaper sector, quote unquote. This bill amounts to a tax on certain companies deemed to have hurt local newspapers, in effect to subsidize the new digital variants of those traditional papers and non-network broadcasters. This isn't a policy aimed at leveling the playing field for competition or solving market failure. It's politicians telling us what they think is good for society and transferring resources to their preferred sector. And I'm just going to jump in and say, but Cato didn't say, but journalism is protected in the Bill of Rights. But we're giving a preferred treatment to them. And then they go on, their last point is the bill goes after the wrong culprit. Big tech didn't kill local journalism. The internet itself did, from Tinder to Substack to sports websites to Nextdoor. It's difficult to see that even guaranteed transfers from Google and Meta would fund output that will get enough eyeballs to run a successful, all singing, all dancing traditional local newspaper alive online. So
Thank you.
That's from the Cato Institute. No surprises.
Okay, so do you guys have comments or you want to move on? We've got two more, I think, reports that we need to get through. Okay, so Dixie or Kathleen, you guys get to duke it out which one goes first.
I can do mine in real short order. It was, if Dixie doesn't mind, I'll go right ahead. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't want to be redundant, and my article was extremely short, and it didn't go into very good detail, really gave no reasoning behind the favorable opinion given, but it basically follows the same kind of logic and arguments that Kathy laid out with the LA Times article, without the kind of supporting reasoning. So this was an article from Vox Media. The chief legal officer wrote a short article in support of this legislation. And basically the upshot is they acknowledge that there are some legitimate criticisms of this proposed legislation, but Vox Media thinks it's an important step forward. It's a step in the right direction and one worth taking. So that's essentially it. They cite a couple of promising improvements they expect the JCPA would allow for, and that's allowing news publishers to get a fair payment for their product. And it would in that way bolster journalism and content creation, which would help curb misinformation and conspiracy theories from proliferating. So that's their take on it. It's kind of superficial, doesn't go into really deep reasoning at all. But yeah, the main points being the big tech companies are deriving a big benefit from having the news publishers' content on their platforms, and they're not sharing the ad revenues that are being depleted by the consumers are being driven to the big tech platforms, and they're not being driven to the news publishers' platforms. So the news publishers lose ad revenues, and the big tech platforms don't compensate them for that. So they see this bill as something that would address that shortcoming. So that's pretty much it. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same thing that LA Times laid out.
Okay, thanks. Dixie.
Okay, mine's pretty short too. First of all, I truly apologize for being late here, but mine was in support of it, and basically the way it only hit on 3 pretty small topics, but it picked the topic and then said why it wasn't an issue. The first one was that it would, let's see, how did they put it? It would reduce the number of employees. So basically, this only applies to newspapers with under 1,500 employees per paper. So the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post are about the only ones with those. And in Australia, the opposite happened, as the cash allowed more journalists to be hired. So they were saying, so people that didn't want it were saying, you know, that, well, let me think. Coming in late, I'm trying to, and I did this a long time ago, so let me make sure I've got this right. So page 22 of the bill requires payments to be tied to how many journalists you have. So the more journalists you have, the more money you get. So this is basically saying, you know, this is a really good thing to have. We're going to have a lot more journalists if we do this. Page 17 requires public disclosure and transparency. So each publication and broadcaster must disclose how much money they get and how it's used. So that was all about the employment related to this. Then the next one was that it would impose a link tax, they claimed, and that would break the internet. And they say, no, it's not going to break the internet to have this, that Australia and Europe did not cause changes to the internet, and people could still go to whatever links they wanted. And then the last thing was that this dictates what's, they're saying that there's a claim that this GCPA dictates what's news, and they say, no, it definitely does not do that. Eligibility is broadly paid from page 5 from publishers and page 3 for broadcasters. So they can decide what they put out as news for today. So basically it just took 3 things that they thought people were using as reasons not to do this and said, okay, here's why we should do it. But it was only pretty small, and it was limited to those 3 topics. So I think there's a whole lot of other topics around this subject. So.
Okay, thank you, everybody. So I'm sure we all have opinions about this. You want to share your opinions? Anybody? Well, I will. I don't like this bill. I think it's really convoluted. It was started out so simple, and then they kept adding all these things. If you can accept new providers into an entity for 60 days after you announce you formed an entity, and then you have to reach a final arbitration by 180 days after you let everybody join, you're talking 240 days. Baseball doesn't do 240 days, you know? I mean, that's ridiculous. I just think it's gotten so complicated. And the part where you can't refuse to let somebody in your group, that just, I mean, that we're supposed to be about access and literacy. And to me, the access is damaged because you are negotiating for too long. And the literacy is damaged because it just says you have to let everybody in and you don't get to moderate. You just have to accept everybody. So that's, I don't like this at all, but okay, I said my opinion.
I agree with what she said.
Yeah, so do I, actually.
Yeah, I think that it's not, there's going to be too many unintended consequences down the line. And I don't agree with a lot of what the Cato Institute said, but I do agree that it's just not right. It's not thought out.
Well, it's complicated. Maybe if they broke it down into several bills. But, you know, having come out of print journalism, I'm trying to say, you know, what is the end goal here? Is it keeping newspapers alive, or is it getting good information to people? And maybe, you know, being in print journal, I prefer print journalism, but maybe it's just one of those things. It's time to move on from the telephone that you took off the wall and asked Mabel to connect you with some number, to using the cell phone, which is a computer. It could be that too. We got to think about what the end goal is
Mhm.
and make it more simple.
Right.
It resonates with me, the piece mentioned that it seems to want to really punish big tech.
Yeah, like they're the root, the whole cause of the demise of local journalism. And I'm not sure you can really say that, you know?
Well, somebody said maybe part of it is coming from the ranch, take the bull by the horns and regulate those online platforms better than they do right now. I think they're afraid of them. And, you know, I kept reading this letter and I thought, okay, where's the money? Where's the money in this letter? You know, about why, and it's definitely in technology, I think, right now, but who gets the money?
It seems like it was started with good intentions, but then everybody'd say, what about this? What about that? And they just kept dumping more stuff to try and solve every person's problem. And now it's just kind of a mess, and the unintended consequences seem potentially quite large.
Yeah, and it started out as like a 5-page letter. When I said I'd read it, it was 5 pages. Then it turned to 35, and then it returned to 44. And as she added, it was Amy Klobuchar's bill and Ken Buck and David Cicilline. And as she added more pages, she got more co-signers. Ted Cruz is one of the co-signers, and he added that part about the no discrimination. If you compare that wording to that Texas bill on they want anti-censorship, where they can't censor anybody on their internet, then you just substitute the words discrimination, non-discrimination for non-censorship. It cuts they cannot moderate. We want them to moderate, right?
Right.
Well, this bill doesn't let them moderate. So.
And that's scary to me. I just can't imagine that. It's bad enough now as it is when they're supposed to be moderating. I can't.
Yeah, it is.
So
I think it's probably Ted Cruz wanting to make sure that some like far right Christian, that nobody can complain, that you have to look at their news literacy later. The veracity is separate from who would get this, pinata to come down from big tech.
Yeah, I think, I found a letter from Ted Cruz to his constituents saying that he had a huge victory with this, because now none of his constituents, well, he didn't say constituents, he said no conservative voices can be silenced now. So,
yeah.
Well, yeah.
So are we all in agreement? Maybe we're all in agreement here.
Yeah. So I guess.
I think so. I was just wondering, does anybody know how this tracks, how closely this tracks to the legislation that was passed in Australia and the European Union?
I don't know.
There were I shouldn't even, I'm shooting off the hip here. From what I read, there were parallels and pitfalls that were similar. But
So we could definitely learn from that. Yeah, I was just curious if they had any kind of non-discrimination clauses in there like this one, or if there are just other unintended consequences that came of that. It doesn't really matter. I dislike this bill, and I kind of liked, the Cato Institute's arguments were very strongly worded, but it raised a lot of good points.
Mm-hmm.
It did. Once I got past that, they weren't acknowledging that this isn't just protecting an industry that makes widgets. This is an industry that protects democracy, and therefore, is an essential component, a pillar. And they never acknowledged that. And I think that was one thing in the letters that Diane reviewed that I liked, was at least they said journalism is important, whereas the Cato Institute gave no indication that journalism was any different from a widget factory. And yeah, maybe the widgets are important and essential to health or whatever industry they provide for, but journalism is protected in the Bill of Rights. So,
Right.
I don't know.
One of the things we've always operated, goodness, I had lots of classes that dealt with this, that print journalism, I know, has always had to operate under the idea of libel and slander, and if that's a public person or if that's a private person. And there is nothing like that for the electronics unless you take them to court. And my goodness, it would be like taking a crack into court. They need some regulations, just like print has had to deal with.
Mhm.
Okay, so I'm just, I don't think this legislation is going to go anywhere. So, but it might, I think it might come back because they did it in 2019 and it's just continued. So I think it might be a good idea. Kathy sent me a link to a form that you have to use if you want national to pay attention to you. And so should I write something up that we can use at the last minute so we have it handy and we can just go from there? We'll have a rough draft of something and I can start it and then we can all participate. How's that sound?
Sounds
That
good.
sound okay? Okay.
Yeah, it sounds good.
All right. So I'll do that. So then, do you guys have anything else you want to bring up about this so we can just move on? So I don't want to keep everybody.
Wanted to ask Christy, what was the name of the group of the link that you put in the chat?
The Electronic Frontier Foundation.
Electronic Frontier, thank you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
EFF.org. And they have, I mean, it seems like this is a topic you all are interested in, they're a good resource for that. And they explore just more than just news access. So anyway.
And I've read some of their work and it connects to what Diana was just saying about the culpability of online news. And that touches on section 230, Diana, or what do we, rule 230, is that the name of it, Linda? And that's a big deal in news literacy discussions. And this Electronic Frontiers group is very much against 230. And I think it's another topic that we need to tap and see where our group stands on this rule 230, because it's always put out there in these kinds of conversations. And I'm also really sorry that Amy Klobuchar swung the bat for a piece of legislation that we can't get behind, because I have hopes for Klobuchar. But anyhow.
Okay.
Me too.
League meeting, no campaigning. Okay.
Yeah.
So, So the next thing I wanted to talk about is the meeting on February 28th, the public meeting on secret surveys. I thought that we had a problem with it. Pardon me?
Was that the quadratic survey or whatever
Yeah.
they were doing?
I thought there was a problem with it, but I talked to Beth and she said that, well, how about at Legislative Action Day, we have somebody talk. I think she said that Chris Hansen, but I thought he couldn't run, but or speak because he's running for mayor, but you know, well, that's not my problem right now. But so that we can still have Jeff and it won't be a redundant thing. So I would like to get it on our calendar and we need a catchy title to put on the calendar. So Jory, what was the title you thought of for the, for the?
Well, it was riffing on the one that you sent. It was Secrets and Shadows or Sunshine and Shadows or something. So
Okay.
Secrets and Shadows, Sunshine and Shadows. I didn't write it down, so it's gone. Sorry.
That's okay.
It was just a riff on the one that you sent.
Okay. Anybody have any other ideas? I was just, you know, the whole, just to be fair, I think I'll ask Jeff to explain why they like the use of quadratic voting, because I think he can give it, you know, he'll be fair about it. He'll present both sides. But I think the question with the quadratic voting is it's transparency versus efficiency. That's what they're arguing. So I was trying to think of a title that wouldn't be boring and wouldn't be long, but it would get that kind of that efficiency in there. So
Yeah, don't put quadratic in because all the algebra phobes will run. So
yeah, nobody's gonna
no
want.
quadratics.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
I did like the Sunshine and Secrets. I thought that was, or Sunshine and Shadows, something
Okay.
colon pithy explanation without the word quadratic. Secret
Right.
meetings and versus efficiency or something.
The topic makes me think of how, like in the case when Fort Collins hired their city manager and the search, they wanted the candidates to be secret because the candidates, many of them said that they wouldn't throw their hat in the ring if they had to expose that they were looking for this job, right? Because you don't get the job and then you look like an idiot where you sit. And that was an issue for the city that was pretty contested, and they ended up with like no candidates. And so our deputy manager, you know, took the post, and that's all water under the bridge. But it's a similar discussion about when government should be able to have a closed door, the intersection of a closed door meeting for decision process before public scrutiny. And I'm just bringing this up to see if there's any words that come to mind in this whole equation that strike what you're really hoping for, Linda.
I'm thinking, well, keep talking.
Yeah. Privacy, efficiency versus scrutiny. That's a little wonky.
Well, I think if it was like, okay, sunshine and shadow, sunshine versus shadows, and then underneath it, we could just say transparency versus efficiency. I mean, I don't know how else to get it in there. You gotta have, you don't want a big long, it's gotta be catchy. What do you think of that?
Sunshine reminds people of the sunshine laws.
Yeah.
Right,
So having sunshine and shadows, I think, is simple enough for people to get it.
right. Sunshine and shadows, semicolon, transparency versus efficiency, something like that. Does that sound, no?
No, because efficiency is a good thing.
Uh-huh.
So we don't want
Well,
that
I
to be
mean,
the opposite of-
there are two sides to it. I
I would
mean,
agree.
that's their argument. There are two sides. It's either you have transparency and efficiency is good too. So you can't, it's not, there are two sides to it.
I think instead of a label, that the second piece should be a full sentence, like when does efficiency, when is efficiency,
Trump or overrules.
yeah, when should efficiency override public knowledge,
Public
public
interest,
interest?
yeah.
In the chat, she's posted, oh, I just lost my chat. But she posted something cool in the chat. If we
Yeah,
open.
that's good.
Public
That's
Yeah.
input in government.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, I
that's
like the word balance.
I'm a
you know.
great titler.
Yeah.
Well, good.
Come up
Yay,
with a title.
Christie.
You're hired.
Yeah,
don't
I
use-
hope you keep coming back to our meetings.
Yes.
I
Don't
do
use
have
the
a,
word
I do
from.
have a question about this though, because, and I'm on, oh my God, the calendar. So I see a December 16th event. I guess that Sonia, you're doing, or you're facilitating at the Harmony Library in Fort Collins. What event or what are you talking about right now that I just gave you a title for? I have no idea.
It is the same speaker, so
Okay.
you're right in recognizing that. On Friday, we're talking about citizens walking into meetings to record, and so that they know that they have the power to do that. And if somebody should tell them, you can't be here, or you're not recording, or Robert's rules, and more on a Larimer County level, so that we're helping build courage of citizens to step up to record. What we have about 100 public meetings a month in our county alone to cover. And so that's Larimer County. And then this next meeting is talking more specifically about what happened at the state level, and how some clearly, I mean, you came up with the title, how some will say, but we need to do this so we can deliver the best foot forward for others to judge. Like, at what point does the public need to get involved? Is there any formative part of the process that would be okay to be behind closed doors, which is a separate question than the courage of a citizen to show up and raise questions and pour sunshine into a local meeting.
And
So
you
it's
did
not-
just get the message that I sent out to the Southern Larimer group about that Friday event.
When is this? So not the Friday event, but the Sunshine and Shadows event. When are you looking at that one happening?
February 28th. It's February 28th. And my idea was every year I try to have something on Sunshine Week, and it just falls apart because Sunshine Week is when people are on spring break. So I've given up on that idea. And so this is for a lead in to Sunshine Week. So everybody knows I'm going to say Sunshine Week a lot at this meeting, so everybody knows when Sunshine Week is. So it's February 28th.
Okay, and how
Linda,
is
will
this
it-
meeting gonna be on site somewhere? Like, is it gonna be in a physical location, or are you gonna broadcast
It's
it?
going to be by Zoom.
So when you have info on that, I want you to share it with me, and I'm gonna put in the chat. I have a blog for Colorado libraries, and I featured the January 16th event that's happening on fake news. And so I'm having 19th, and then I'm having Karen talk, and really what she's going to pitch is how libraries around the state can reach out to a local county league and for partnership with, like, oh, well, we don't have enough staff to do program, but you can do programming on news literacy and all these things, and you can bring in speakers. And if you have a Zoom event that I can share, that means that perhaps libraries all over the state, or, not a million libraries, but perhaps, libraries in different areas can broadcast that at their library and perhaps get some people
Oh,
to show up.
Have a watch party.
I've done
like-
that. Right, like a watch party. So anyway,
cool.
if you give me information on that, then that's something I can plug during my next week event with Karen. Be like, hey, by the way, February, there's gonna be an
Okay.
event that maybe you guys can host a watch party. Put that on your
Okay.
calendar.
So did you put your email in your contact information? Can you do that for me, please?
Yeah, I'll do that right now.
Okay, so does that sound good to you guys? We good on that one?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
great.
Do you, Kathy or Kathleen or Jory, do you have anything on the deliberative journalism project you guys wanted to share? He's having meetings coming up, right? He's gonna have a celebration or something? Martine? You're muted, Kathleen. Kathleen, you're muted.
It's backwards from, I can't
Yeah.
figure out the logic of this mute, unmute. I just put something on the calendar for, maybe Jory can remind me what the date was. I can't remember it.
February 9th or 6th. Let me go
Thank
look,
you.
because now I'm confused. It's, I believe,
Yeah, I think it was
let me
February
go look.
9th. We were going back and forth between February 9th and February 16th. Yeah, it was the 9th, yeah. So it's a 1-year anniversary of this deliberative journalism project having started. And so what they want to do at this meeting is kind of recap what they've been doing and where they plan to go in the future. So it's kind of, and they're going to run it in 2 sessions, an early session and then a little half-hour break, like 3:30 to 5 and then 5:30 to 7. 2 sessions that will be exactly the same content. It's just to accommodate different people's schedules that want to attend. So that's just gone up on the League of Women Voters calendar.
Yeah, we don't have the
And
registration.
we'll fill in more
link.
details as they come available. We don't have a video link for it. It's going to be Zoom based. So we'll put the video link on there later once it becomes available.
Okay, thank you. Do you guys have anything else from deliberative journalism? Okay, I have one more thing. This isn't really league related, but I promised I would bring this up. I was contacted by Sidna Rashid, and she does, she's very involved with Front Range Forum, and they wanted to do, I don't know if you guys know how Front Range Forum works, but it's in Fort Collins, it's with their senior center, and they have classes on different topics. Sidna wants a class on the media, is what she said. That's what she called it. And she knew I was leading this task force. And I got kind of excited at first because I thought it was a really good way to promote a few things. But talking to Sidna, she does not want it to be league based. So I'm out. I won't do it. But if anybody is interested in leading a discussion, I can put you in contact with Sidna. Usually I think how the classes operate is it's like Great Decisions or something they read, and then different students will facilitate one of the classes. The classes are 2 hours, once a week, 4 to 8 weeks, whatever you want to do. But I won't do it because she doesn't want it to be a league event. So, okay.
Well, and
Do you
my
guys have
thought
any-
after we talked, Linda, was they do charge students for those classes and we don't charge for league events.
I know. Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
kind of a good thing she doesn't want it to be league based, I guess.
Yeah.
I should say I've never heard of us charging for league events. Is that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think she did have Homeward Alliance. Remember, they did something on homelessness. But anyway, it just won't work. So I'm not doing it. But if you guys want to do it as an individual, I will give I'll give you Sidna's contact or tell her to contact you. You just let me know.
So
Okay.
does Sidna, is she like working with the forum? Like, I'm trying to figure out why is she concerned if they have gaps in their schedule, or she was offering this thinking that it would be really good for us? Like,
It's for the forum. It's for the
it's for
forum.
the forum. But
Yeah. Sidna,
then
I
the
think
forum
is
would
not-
collect money, but the speaker doesn't, right?
I think they charge, the tuition is like $35. The way it's set up, it's like this, they'll have a facilitator, but the facilitator is a volunteer. And the students take turns facilitating a class, you know, so that's generally how it goes. It doesn't have to all the time. But, and I know there are league members who participate, but they don't represent the league when they do it. So anyway, well, you guys, I've kept you here 25 minutes. I said it was gonna be 10 or 15, and I've kept you way longer. So thank you very much for helping. And I hope you all have a very happy holiday season, and I'll probably see some of you between, and I'll work on this thing that I promised. And is there anything else you guys want to bring up before we go? Nope. You ready to go? You ready to get out of here?
Mhm.
Okay, I'm gonna save the chat so that I can send it out to you later. If I don't, sometimes you never know if I actually save it or not, but I'll do it again. Okay. All right, you guys.
Thanks for coming, Christy. It was good to meet you.
Happy
Hope to see you
Happy
again.
Yeah.
holidays, everybody.
Happy
Likewise. Bye,
holidays.
guys.
See you.